history. I don't really think too much about like when Columbus came over and all that, but after that, all the wars and everything, you don't really hear like the Native American perspective of it. You just hear like how would you say, like the white way. They just wanted to tell their way. Oh yeah, those Native Americans, they were vicious people, always wanted to start a war, and it's not true. We didn't want to fight anybody. Well, like you can tell in like all the history classes and everything, it's what they want you to know. But you hear like the Native American stories, it's totally different. But you don't hear that side. You hear the other way, where we're vicious people and all that.
I think it was a general overview when we were covering basic American history, but it wasn't incredibly centered to focus on Native American history or culture. They probably could cover Native American history more. I mean, it's covered, but there's some definitely leave out parts. Definitely they can use more coverage of it.
I would hate for definitely, white people and the majority in this country in particular to perpetuate what has happened in the past. Like, for example, we segregated Native Americans from everyone else. I would hate to, I guess, propagate that segregation in the future. And I think now we know better and we're smarter than our ancestors were, and we know that the color of your skin and your beliefs doesn't make you better than one person or another. And so I think we do have a responsibility to learn from our past and our history and to assimilate, because we all are in this country now, and unfortunately we can't change the past. It's already happened. So hopefully we can learn from it and learn to really just make the country a better place than it was before the white people took it away from the Native Americans.
There was this one time in class that the teacher talked about how Native Americans weren't compared to the Holocaust. Like, the teacher said the Native Americans weren't treated as bad as the people who went through the Holocaust. And that kind of got me, like, why would you say something like that? Because you don't know the history behind it. Native Americans were treated badly before the Holocaust. Like, the Holocaust wouldn't exist if the Native Americans didn't go through what they did. Like, Hitler designed his whole thing based on how the U.S. treated Native Americans. He's a non-native, so it kind of bothered me when he said that, because he didn't understand. Like, when he said it, like, things were going through my head, like, oh, he's non-native, so he doesn't really understand. But then again, why would he say that? I mean, he didn't go through it. Maybe he hasn't taken a Native American class, or maybe he didn't learn about Native Americans or the Native American history, but there's, like, you take kind of like your anger, it gets you mad sometimes. And, I always think back to myself, like, I should have said something. I should have stand up for what, I believe and what Native Americans stand for. But at the same time, it's just this oh, I might get in trouble for saying that, or for defending myself, and you know, like there's always this feeling of I might get in trouble for saying that, or he might turn it into something that it was my fault for doing, but it was actually his fault for saying it, you know. And there's times in classes where teachers would say something about Native Americans, and you want to say something, and you do say something, and it just creates this tension between you and your teacher.
The history that's taught here in America, that doesn't really tell the whole story of the Native people. They only tell a little few clips of it here and there, but not many people really fully understand what happened back in the day. I went to I went to the East Coast, and a lot of people didn't know that Native Americans still existed. They thought we were all extinct. Went to the West Coast, and people thought we were not natives. They thought we were Hispanics, Mexicans, the people down south. And it was found it really funny. It's like, I thought you guys knew your history. Turns out, no, they don't. None of them even know what a Native American is either. And when they do meet one, they still think that we live in the Stone Age, living in teepees, wear war paint, wear feathers and all this stuff. They still have that stereotypical Indian view of us. And in fact, it's like, no, we changed just as much as you guys have. But yeah, not many people know about us. And around the world, I don't think many people know about us either around there. But I know a lot of people here in America still don't know. They remember a few things about us, but they don't know much. A lot, I should say.
I think they leave out Native American stories and Native American experience in mainstream American schools. I teach a lot of 100 level classes or introduction classes, and most of my students have never even met a Native American person and do not understand the history of Native Americans, and a lot of that is often left out in mainstream school books across the country. For example, when I'm teaching either a Native American history class or Intro to American Indian Studies, we often have to start at the beginning. So I often discuss the Bering Strait theory, or we talk about Christopher Columbus. And a lot of my students who've never taken a Native Studies class or anything else, what they learn in school is that Christopher Columbus was a hero, and that he was this great explorer, and that nothing really negative came of that. But what we talk about in the Native Studies classes is the truth behind that he was responsible for mass genocide, rape, torture, murder. And as far as how the students respond to that, most of the Native students already know this history, but a lot of the non-Native students are really shocked, and they feel kind of cheated that they don't learn this history in high school or even younger than that.
It would be silly to say you need to learn the history of other countries around the world and not learn the actual history and culture of the country that you've been raised.
At least when I was in the school, we didn't really learn that much about Native Americans, because I'm from Spain, and according to history, Colón came here the first, and Colón was supported by the Spanish crown, and after that, we became kind of, I don't know, so we just learned how many things we got from America thanks to Colón and all these things, but we never learned so many things about what the Spanish did to people who were living here and the history of the people who were living here before Spanish came. So, yeah.
There's a lot of like horrible stuff that, the settlers, did to the Native American population, and a lot of, and a lot of that was just like this kind of, Eurocentric, like white people are better than everyone else kind of, mentality or, culture. And I mean, it's really horrible, but of course, that wasn't just Native Americans, that was, at some point it was all the Asians that were immigrating and all, all the black people that they had, taken away from their homes in Africa for the slave trade and their, descendants. So, there's a really long history of racism in this country. And I feel like racism in general is a very, it's a very, I wouldn't say natural, but it's a very common, thing for ethnic groups to not get along with each other. And I don't know. I feel like as we move more towards, a more like melting pot community, it's those kind of things are starting to, die a little more. And they're definitely still an issue today, but not quite in the same way that, it was even 50 years ago.
I think that the classes are getting better, and especially since this is college, they try to talk about how the colonialism has affected how classes have been taught for so long, and now they're trying to break out of that. I did have that mentality in high school, so I was familiar with it. Although I still think that it could use more, because there are so many narratives within history itself that it shouldn't just be Native American, it shouldn't just be African American, it shouldn't just be Asian American, it should be all kinds of history just intertwined, and that should be the narrative of what like the US history is, what the history of Germany is, what the history of Algeria is. Those histories, they should be inclusive of all groups, women, children, all ages. So they're working on it, and I give it credit, but like I said, it's still stuck in a place where people talk about how, oh, I know this is how you were, like, people, gosh, this is so hard to articulate. Like, people always talk about how they never got this kind of exposure in their, high school, even in some college classes. But it needs to move beyond that and just kind of take action and put it in there and just like recognize that this is history and it should be taught as equal history, not that history needs to be changed.
Well, apparently there was an apology long ago, I think. I don't remember how many years ago it was, but it was an apology, but it was like deep in so much paperwork that no one really cared to look at it. And the apology that was written, not many of us liked it. It was something that we didn't feel like it was a right apology to ask to say. And personally, I say, yeah, that's what I kind of want, just an apology for what's happened to us. However, it seems like no one really cares. And that's what's kind of upsetting to me. And I kind of wish that kind of changed, but no, I don't think government is helping much of the people. They just want them to say sorry for what their ancestors did to us, to our people. I mean, it's not just them personally, but their ancestors who were here long before they were, who actually came here. And they're the ones that kind of hurt us. I just want them to apologize for what their ancestors did to our ancestors.
I think that it's important that, you know, the Native community is represented in, you know, it's very important, you know, that they have representation in this country. You know, they were here first. In a lot of ways, I don't think you can blame someone's child for what they do. And you know, a lot of, as you know, we are, you know, becoming a more public society, and it's less of our lives are based on our, you know, or you know, the public opinion is not really. Racism is not okay in, you know, public opinion, and you know, I feel like a lot of that stuff, you know, is slowly changing, and it's getting better for, you know, those smaller ethnic oppressed, you know, minorities, you know, like the Native Americans, and you know, I think it's getting better. I think it's very important still that, you know, people understand what happened.
I personally don't feel like I have to apologize for people that I don't even know. For people in the past that, I mean, it's not my fault, really. I mean, yeah, I am a product of the other people that came over, and it is sad, but I don't know, I don't feel like that's, I don't know, I don't think it's appropriate for me to apologize. For one, I think that this generation should recognize and know what the history did entail, and I think knowing is the only thing we can do. And if Native Americans feel like an apology is necessary, they're completely entitled to that feeling, and I'm sure if I were in this situation learning about each individual instances that, you know, people that the white community had affected their families, I'm sure I would apologize.
What I saw was it happened in the past, so forget about it, but that didn't really help. But it's now, the way I see it now is more saying that the past happened, you can't change it. But you can try to fix the wrongs, and you could try to fix the wrongs that were done to us. You gotta forgive people. At least try and make the wrongs right again. Despite what has happened, it's good to just forgive and just move on. But just never forget just don't forget your history of what happened. Because that'll keep people, I would say that keeps people in check, and knowing that, just keep them in check of what they did to people. Make them humble, I would say. That's the best way to do it.
One thing I would like for non-natives to know is just think about that history still hurts us, and our government doesn't really have full power. It's only limited.
You have to look at history. It's basically you learn what you have from history or from your parents and what they experienced. You know, also I think that it's changing all the time, the world and everything. So you gotta keep some of them that's value and essential and most important, and then like evolve during time, because you know everyone you cannot only just look back, and you should also like see what's fit now and then maybe develop some new things.